Lieutenant Reardon, can you tell me a few things about yourself and what you do here at the police station?
Sure. So my name is Matt Reardon. I'm a lieutenant detective here at Medway Police Department. I'm starting my 27th year here. I began as a dispatcher and reserve officer and worked my way up through the ranks over the years. First as a full-time patrolman, and then kind of as what we'd call now a patrol investigator. At the time, we didn't have dedicated detectives, so a few of us did cases while we worked patrol. Then in 2013, I became the first full-time detective here at Medway PD. In 2016, I was promoted to sergeant, spent a short time back in patrol, and then became detective sergeant, was there for a couple of years until I was promoted to lieutenant about a year and a half ago. When I made lieutenant, I took over. There's 2 lieutenants within our department. My counterpart is in charge of patrol and kind of the day-to-day operations. I oversee specialty positions, so I'm in charge of detectives, court prosecution, the school resource officer, dispatchers, and kind of the police administration side of the house. So our records management system, our IT areas, kind of some of the back-end type things.
So with your experience, I'm sure that you know about police de-escalation programs. Are you familiar with them at all?
Absolutely, and it's actually ironic that in this wave of police reform, police de-escalation became such a hot topic. In reality, we've been de-escalating for years. As long as there's been police, de-escalation has been a tool in our toolbox, and I think police have done it much more than is ever realized. Today, the talk of police de-escalation does bring some new ideas and some new tools, but in reality, police have been working to de-escalate as long as there's been police.
That's great to hear. Do you think that the techniques like learned or taught can actually help in real life situations that you've been in?
Absolutely. So, it's never, police are taught to use force, but we're always taught, it's never our first choice, it's never our first option. For years, your voice and, just your presence oftentimes can be a de-escalation. Sometimes it can, just the presence of a uniform can escalate people. Sometimes it de-escalates a situation. Sometimes how you talk to and how you address people or whatnot can de-escalate. The new tools or the kind of some of the new techniques being taught, I think just highlight and further highlight the importance sometimes of time, of distance, and of slowing things down when you can to create that gap. And sometimes that just everybody taking a breath for a minute can really de-escalate and slow things down, and that can be important.
I definitely agree with that. Does the Medway Police Department have de-escalation programs that officers can utilize?
Absolutely. So, again, de-escalation is taught and has been taught through the police academy for many, as long as there's been police. It's never been called that, but, space, time, verbalization, direction, cues are all forms of de-escalation. Ironically, just the other day, I sat in on a training and we were training our 4 new officers who just graduated the police academy in tasers. And one of the points of the taser training is sometimes you have a volatile, hostile subject. Sometimes merely taking your taser out of the holster and displaying it, or just having it in your hand, that can be a de-escalation. You activate the taser, it turns on lights and lasers, and that you point at somebody. Sometimes the mere light and laser can be a de-escalation. So, although the use of a taser, is force, and usually the situation has escalated to require force, sometimes the mere presence of that can be de-escalation. So that was a kind of an interesting take and highlight on the kind of 2 sides of every force option. Beyond that, we send all of our officers to a training called Mental Health First Aid, which highlights mental health issues and some of the different ways you can recognize symptoms of mental health issues, and some things that that can help or hurt in those situations. So we make all of our officers attend that training, and you have to be recertified in that every couple of years. Additionally, we send a vast majority of our officers have attended what they call crisis intervention training, which is a 40-hour training on mental health issues and other ways to de-escalate critical situations. CIT training is a part of the International Chiefs of Police Association's One Mind campaign, and IACP recommends that every police department have at least 20% of their officers trained in CIT. I think we're pushing 80% or something, where we have a very high number of our officers that we've been able to get through that training. Additionally, in the wake of police reform, obviously there's new opportunities out there for training, and there's been a lot of training in de-escalation. So we've been sending our officers to a number of programs being run by the State Academy that offer new and additional de-escalation techniques and whatnot. So we're very focused on it. It's a key part of police training that is always expanding, and we take every opportunity to do that.
That's great to hear, especially regarding mental health. How do you and your fellow officers feel about the effectiveness of the information learned, especially revolving around mental health, and how they can help in situations where they're on scene and someone has a mental health crisis?
It's always beneficial, right? Every time you learn about a topic from a different perspective or a new perspective, it always brings new and beneficial information. For a number of years, or for a long time, police training was very much focused kind of on tactical and safety, and it still is, but there's a new focus now on maybe just rushing to handle a situation isn't the best way. There's a new focus on being able to take more time and using time more on your side to handle some of these volatile situations. So it's definitely a change in thinking in that way that is extremely helpful.
I definitely agree on that. I've seen how it can help in videos that have been shown in classes and other things like that. Have you ever been in a situation where you've used a police de-escalation tactic that you've learned through the mental health program?
Without a doubt. I mean, again, I think we're trained in de-escalation from day one, and nobody's ever realized it. So, we're fortunate in this town. We have a very low use of force rate. I would say much lower than even area towns. And I think that is largely because of, even before all this training, our philosophy, and we kind of always had taught our younger officers to take that time and use that into the value of being able to communicate and talk with people. So that's absolutely effective. One of the things we've done here a number of years ago, again, kind of before the police reform movement, was we developed a program in conjunction with Franklin PD. We didn't develop the program, we brought it to our departments, that provides a full-time mental health clinician to both of our departments. So we regularly will employ the use of our clinician in these situations. That is another tool that can help de-escalate. And we have some people in town that we tend to deal with frequently with some significant mental health issues, and we've been able to, through our practices, develop relationships with them and the family that oftentimes we can kind of head off issues before they become crises, and that we found that to be very effective as well.
That sounds excellent. And you already described a situation in which you have these people that are, regularly dealing with mental health crises. Has there been a specific technique that has helped them the most that you've noticed?
No, I don't think there's a one technique. There's never a one size fits all answer, right? There's always a variation of tools in every scenario. In some instances, time can be your slowing things down. Other times, it's the communication. Other times, it may be a tactic of showing a tool like a taser or something. So there's never a one size fits all approach. You have to evaluate every person, every situation, every crisis differently, and use what you think is going to be effective. I think the biggest thing that comes out of de-escalation, or the new conversation about it, is some of these instances, just that time can be, how much of a benefit time can be, I guess. That switch away from the mentality of rush to clear the call, a different approach that if somebody's only a danger to themselves, they're not a danger to necessarily anybody else around. Kind of a different approach. You can slow things down and ultimately you don't want them to hurt themselves, but you don't necessarily have to rush and make a situation worse if that's where they're already at. So time is a huge help.
It does sound like time could definitely be beneficial. Have there been difficult situations you have been in where you wished a different technique that you use that isn't really taught to younger officers would have been used and maybe help the situation better?
Sometimes I think, especially when it comes to mental health issues, sometimes you have to be creative and think out of the box. I can think of a particular individual that we deal with regularly, who can become very paranoid at the sight or involvement of police. He can also be very volatile and can be violent and dangerous. So we've had, again, this is one of those situations where we develop the relationship with the family, and we come up with out-of-the-box thinking. And we, sometimes will use different tactics. Our officers may dress up as construction workers or different things like that, where just being creative, where you can't necessarily, bringing the police in a uniform may make situations worse. So sometimes you have to think out of the box and work differently to approach situations to keep that level down. And I think that's the biggest message to new officers, is you don't always have to tackle everything the same way. Sometimes some creative thinking and different approaches can be very effective.
That sounds amazing. Do you think that you would ever bring those ideas in the situations that you've had within Medway to other parts of the country, other towns, and Massachusetts, those different ideas and perspectives?
Certainly, if they were, willing. I think, I think a lot of these things are the trend in law enforcement now, and I think most departments are looking at these ideas and trends much more closely and adapting their tactics. Like I said, this, one of the great things that have come out of this police reform is expanding a number of the tools. I don't want to say that this new wave of police reform and de-escalation is new, because it's not. But it's also enhancing what we did before, rethinking what we did before, and changing the dynamic, which I think is excellent. So it's kind of a new approach to an old idea, and it's definitely helpful, I believe.
And last question for you. What is your personal opinion about de-escalation techniques?
Again, I think they're critical. They're excellent. You have to have them. But with that said, there are situations and there are times when you can't de-escalate, where force is dictated upon you, and not every situation can be effectively de-escalated. Is it always a goal? Is it a hope? Is it, what your focus should be early and often? Absolutely. And I think, again, I think the introduction of, or not the introduction, but the approach to using more time in these situations is very helpful and very effective. So,
Well, thank you so much for your time and for what you do for the community. We all appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.